actually got quite a jam-packed schedule. We've got 4 workshop sessions that are going to be delivered throughout the course of today. The first one is the one that you've all attended, the live production cameras. This is going to be a very interesting session talking about our live production camera technology, focusing on products like Studio Camera, Ursa Broadcast G2, many of the shared technologies that exist across our camera range, but also talking about some of the key differences, so why you might want to pick one camera versus another. So that's going to be the first session today that Mikel's going to kick off very soon. At 12 we've got another session which is going to be delivered by my colleague Chris, the 18 television studio workflow. We've had for many years a number of video switchers, commonly referred to as ATEM. It's grown into a rather large family, and the TV Studio HD8 and the HD8 ISO are our newest switchers, and I think it's fair to say bring a lot of the new technology into a single integrated production system. So Chris is going to talk about the benefits of working with the TV Studio, some of the unique features that it offers, and also the benefits when you pair our switchers with our camera technology as well. There is going to be food for lunch served outside, so I would strongly recommend, if you are planning on being here for the whole day, make sure you grab a bite to eat, and there are tea and coffees outside as well. Then at 2 we're going to go into digital filmmaking, which again is going to be delivered by Mikel. This is going to be talking about our cinema-based cameras, products like Pocket Cinema cameras, Ursa Mini Pro 12Ks. Again, the shared technology between those devices, but also what makes each of those cameras unique, and from a creative standpoint, why you may work with one camera over another. We're also going to be talking about technologies like Blackmagic Raw, which was recently introduced 2019, I think it was, IBC, if I recall. See, I've done my homework. And obviously talking about the benefits of shooting in RAW. That's going to lead us nicely into the very final session, which is DaVinci Resolve 18.5. We acquired DaVinci Systems back in 2009, and over the last 14 years it has really changed and transformed, both in terms of as a software platform, but also the creative landscape as well. So we're going to be talking about the new features in 18.5 and talking about collaborative workflow, and again showcasing some of the benefits when you take RAW and bring those into DaVinci Resolve as well. So we've got a busy day planned, so please, thank you again for taking time out of your day. We really hope you enjoy it. As I said, tea and coffee is available throughout the day, so please make sure you do get refreshments, and we will be serving lunch outside as well. I also want to thank Outlet Studios for providing us with their facilities. They've been great to work with, so thank you so much indeed, and also for the great team at Stage Audio Works. We've been working with them for many, many years. They're our value distribution partner and have been absolutely amazing to work with, and have been critical in helping us pull this event together. So thank you so much, guys, and I'm going to hand over to Mikel now, so he's going to take you to the first session. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that's it.
This is for you.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that. Right. Somebody has already his first coffee. I can have that, but appreciate it. Keep going on. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. It's lovely to see so many of you today. Yesterday was jam-packed here, so today is the same, so that's great. My name is Michele. Been working for Blackmagic Design for the last 11 years. So it's a long time with them. So I've seen the breed of any sort of like product that Blackmagic came out with, cameras, ATEM, any sort of like converters, decklink cards. But today we're going to discuss the line of our sort of like broadcast and studio production SDI-based camera. I'm a technical sales specialist, so I look after basically the whole spectrum of product at Blackmagic for the South Med at the minute, so in the European land. But again, I've got a vast experience on the camera side. Working in post, in production as well. So yeah, many years in the business, so I think I do know quite a lot of stuff around these camera. As I said, it's kind of like seeing them like kind of like born in a way. So today we're going to discuss these two systems. I got a, can you just lower it down a little bit, the mic is echoing quite a lot. We got the Studio Camera 6K Pro, and then we got the Ursa Broadcast G2, okay? Both of them are fantastic studio production camera, but they are based on SDI technology, okay? Why we kind of like promoting this SDI technology? Well, many of you probably even during the COVID or even in the past have used probably HDMI technology, coming from different backgrounds. You've been all confined at home, you have to stream, you have to use your ATEM Mini, so you're probably very familiar with that, which is fine when you are at home in a very small room. when you don't have to cover the distance, which is great. HDMI, widely available everywhere, fantastic. But you know what the limits are? No. HDMI cables, how long can you go with an HDMI cable?
20 meters.
20 meters?
If you're lucky.
Whoa, if you're lucky. I would say 10 if you're lucky. And then if you really need to push the HDMI, you need to go for active cable. Then you can go, 20, 30 meters, but you have to spend your money, okay? And again, what are the other limitations of the HDMI? What do you think? Well, I'll tell you what, the connectivity itself, okay? Try to connect that, and then all of a sudden you turn away, boom, you kick the cable, get plugged, done. At home, everything is controlled, you know, your husband, your wife comes along with the coffee, HD, 4K up to P30 or 4K up to P50, okay? So, so we can cover a lot of distance with the SDI cable, generally around 100, 120 meters when we're working in 3G, so HD, or something around 60, 70 meter with a good quality cable and a good connector, I'll come back to that, in 4K, P50 or P60, okay? So the connector is slightly different. It's a bayonet connector, it's a BNC connector. So that is a locking mechanism. Therefore, it doesn't go anywhere. You can tug it, it doesn't do anything, okay? It stays sturdy. The maximum you can do, you can probably pull the cable apart and tear it, but the only thing you have to do, you have to recrimp the SDI, which is not easy to do, but at least, you know, you've got something which is very secure. It is a broadcast standard type of connectivity, okay? So that's why we sort of like feature this type of connectivity in this camera. So, let's have a look, obviously, at the camera itself now. We're going to run through the studio camera first. I'll present you what it is. And then we move to the broadcast camera, and we give you some alternative to the SDI as well, okay? So, studio camera 6K Pro, it is a super 35 millimeter sensor, okay? It's a 6K sensor. That means that it always samples the image at 6K, although on the output, you can choose whether you're going to output a 4K or an HD stream, okay? But that's great because you're oversampling the image, so you've got tons of image information, pixel, and then it's going to get oversampled to your 4K or HD, okay? This is brilliant. What else? Because it's a super 35 millimeter sensor, it has a very filmic look in itself, but also wide dynamic range, okay? We're talking about 12 stop of dynamic range. Well, maybe for broadcast it doesn't really mean a lot, but actually that contrast ratio that you get makes that picture stand out pretty well, okay? The good thing of this system is also a dual ISO, okay? So that means it's almost having two sensors in one. That is servo, okay? Which is great. So, and also it doesn't break the bank because you know how much, control and focus demand costs when you actually pair it with its own lens, okay? Only that is probably worth the price of the studio camera itself, okay? What else we got on this side of the camera? We got XLR connectivity for audio, analog audio, obviously, and we do have a 5-pin XLR for your tall back headset. Yes, because this camera has a tall back brain into it, okay? So obviously you are used to tall back, headset, and mic, well, that has the same brain inside the camera, okay? Which is great, so use anything like Biodynamic or Clearcom, you can choose it. It's a normal, again, standard 5-pin XLR, okay? Let's have a look, you're just going around this camera now, kind of turning around before going to the other side. Well, this is great because it's inbuilt, it's a massive touchscreen LCD screen, okay? So all the main features that you want to change and the setting you need to change are literally at the press of a finger on the LCD screen. So I can literally drive anything if I want to check on my drive or maybe change the frame rate or maybe the shutter, anything, like the gain of the camera, I can do directly from the screen. But also it's quite massive. And it's quite bright as well. It's 2000 nits bright. And when I say 2000 nits is a lot, believe me. So when you go out there, when you are in the outdoor sort of like scene, well, you will understand pretty much what it means to have so much brightness. On a sunny days, at least here in South Africa, not in Manchester, I'll show you that. We don't use that. It's pretty useless. But yeah, here would be very relevant as a feature. So yeah, we've got function buttons, we've got the program return, we got a couple of like three dials here to adjust the focus peaking and the brightness of the monitor itself. So it's pretty useful to see how much control you got there. Again, literally at your fingertip. On top of that, you see there is a tally box here, because obviously when the camera receives the signal, will give you that sort of like signaling that information, either preview or program. You'll see it in a moment. Let's go around this camera to the other side, which to me is probably the most interesting part of the camera, which is the connectivity, so the peripheral to actually connect to a switcher or matrix or video hub or whatever, okay? Is the output, so the I/O connectivity. First, on top of that, obviously full-size HDMI connectivity. That obviously is bi-directional. You can still use it with your 8 mini, perhaps, if you've got an 8 mini which is HDMI based. But obviously, we said today we're going to discuss SDI solution. We got an SDI output and an SDI input. We'll see how it works as soon as we start connecting this camera. And beneath that, we do have an Ethernet port for RJ45, and again, that will unveil a few of the neat features that this camera has. Redundancy power, 12 volts and 4-pin XLR. This is quite important on a system like that. You don't want to kind of like have your power cut and having to sort of like figure out what to do with that. So the redundancy is key here. Okay, and so these are the connectivity. So what I'm going to do now, I'm really going to connect it. Okay, got a bunch of cables down here. Okay, let's pick this. Okay. Oh. I'll get to that in a second. So I see that when I go into a program, my tally light will get there eventually. Okay, but let's go back to my presentation here, okay? Fine. So, not only that, we get that toll back as well, so you get the intercom on the same return feed, okay? Which is great. So that means that all these things are traveling with one single cable, okay? Which is great. Well, in that case, then if you're looking at something a bit more robust in terms of like form factor, in terms of like builds, well, then you might want to have a look at the Ursa Broadcast G2. Obviously, as you can see, the studio camera is a camera that really goes on the tripod more than anything, okay? But if you are into more like ENG style, when you're working on the shoulder, maybe you're looking at something that can mount a different set of lenses. For example, here I got a B4 lens, okay? Maybe a bit longer focal distance. Well, in that case, well, the Ursa Broadcast is perfect for it. It's a very similar camera in terms of quality that you get out of the sensor, okay? Because the sensor is exactly the same one, okay? It's still a 6K sensor. It's still got the dual ISO system in it, and it's a Super 35. The only difference being the mount, okay? The mount is, by default, from us, comes with a B4 mount, okay? However, it is an interchangeable one. So that means that you can literally, take it off by unscrewing a couple of hex screws over there, and then put up an EF mount, okay, which comes in the box of the camera. So if you, for example, have a pack of lenses of EF, for example, you can still use it on this broadcast camera. So you don't have to go down the route of expensive B4 lenses. But there are, I'll take a question later. If it's a quick one, I'll do.
No, I was just going to ask, because here we've got a problem with load shedding. Does it take a battery?
Oh, sorry.
Does it take a battery?
The battery?
We have a problem with load shedding here.
The camera, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, of course the camera takes batteries, okay. So that's absolutely fine. So the camera has a V-lock mount at the back of it, okay? The studio camera you meant. The studio camera you will have to find a way to provide a battery source, okay? You have to use a DC power or some sort of XLR connector. I'll tell you later in the QA session, we can talk about that. So what's happening here, again, the sensor is exactly the same sort of quality, interchangeable mount, but you can see now the feature of this camera on the side are very much in line with the design of somebody using the camera on the shoulder, because all the same feature that I can change on the LCD, which again I have here, okay, again, same touch screen sort of technology, I can change everything with my finger, but when I'm working ENG, I haven't got the luxury of keeping the LCD open, am I? So what I rely on is my muscle memory here. So what I'm going to do, I'm literally going to change my relevant settings here from literally the dials that I got here, the potentiometer, anything that I got here relevant to this production, okay? I got even audio control, the program return feed, I can see everything related to ISO with the color balance, everything here on this sort of like spring button, okay? So, but also you might have noticed that I got a record button on this camera, okay? Which is great because we do have a, I think it's still here, you might not be able to see it. Don't worry, Chris, it'll be fine. Okay. Again, if I go to the preview, okay, that's fine. Let's go to preview. I should be able to see a preview over there. The camera is live here. I got you over here. Okay, so that's fine. Quick one on the other side, just for completeness, really. I can literally mount some sort of accessory in this camera as well. We rely on the studio camera on the big monitor over there, but on this camera, because it's designed for ENG operation or cinematography operation, you can see I got an EVF, which is attached to the side of the camera on the SDI output, which is always 1080, okay, always HD, and I got obviously an XLR 4-pin for the power. A little high-rose connector here to connect B4 lenses, just to power those kind of lenses, okay? So I got full control of that, which is great. So, but what's the alternative for SDI here? Well, if you are looking at kind of like covering a longer distances, or maybe you are in something very, very, you know, big venue like stadium, or if you're doing sports, generally SDI, again, the maximum length that you can find is 100 meters, then you have to reclock the signal somehow. While in that situation, in a broadcast environment, they tend to use a different type of connectivity, okay? In the past, in some installation it is still the present, they use a triax system, okay? If you're not sort of familiar with that technology, triax systems or cables are cables that allows you to use one single cable to transport everything. Audio, video, power, return feeds, everything really, okay? It's a bit of an old sort of like technology nowadays because it can only be pushed up to HD, which is still a reality for many markets, but where the things are going is still not enough to pump, you know, 4K out there. So it is slowly sort of like dying or getting replaced by SMPTE 311, okay, which is the same sort of concept, but it allows you to actually use a much more robust cable, which is this one, which can drive obviously kilometers of information because technically inside you got a couple of fiber cables here, okay, and it can also distribute power, okay. What's the drawback of this cable as well? There is obviously, you know, some sort of like compromise that you need to take here. Well, is the cost of the cable, okay? These are very costly, okay? And it's not really the cable itself, the part of the cable, the connectors are what you're really paying for, okay? These connectors are not fragile, but you need to look after them, let's say, okay? It's clean, it's got, you know, a proper fiber end, so you need to keep it, you know, keep it pristine. But that is an alternative that we offer with this camera when the camera is paired with, again, an optional sort of object, okay? Which is this one here, which we call Studio Fiber Converter. So what's happening here, the camera will send you this fiber signal. It will convert the signal from normal baseband SDI through a TICO compression 4.1 is a visually lossless, zero latency, and then that will travel to the base, which is this one, okay? It's not a camera control unit, it's a converter, because what it does, it takes the fiber connection from here, and it converts it back into the SDI baseband, okay? It's literally a conversion, okay? But obviously, now we're able to drive this signal for over, well, for around 2 kilometers with power, okay, and everything else in between. Tally, tollback, control, everything here. So let's connect it, let's see how it works. Well, in that case, I have to do a little bit of a magic, okay, so allow me that. If you kind of like kindly close your eye for a second and forget about this camera. Hey, I was that quick. Here you go. So this is the fiber back, okay, the fiber converter. So as you can see from the back of the unit, you have basically the same SDI cable that I was using, which is now interfacing with this fiber converter here. So still, the logic is the same. Baseband into fiber, fiber traveling the distance, then gets reconverted into baseband. Okay, easy. So let's connect it up, okay? So I'm gonna connect it to the SDI input of the fiber converter. I actually got two, okay? 12G rated, so up to 4K P50 or P60. And I got 3 returns available here. Why do I have 3 returns? Well, sometimes you also need to get something else apart from the return feed and the visual feed. Think about a teleprompter, okay? Or a reference monitor which is running at something else which is not yourself or any other feed, okay? Graphics, something like it, okay? So you got the 3 returns. So that comes back from the same fiber cable, okay? All converted down to HD. So no matter what you're sending into this return, could be even a 4K picture, it would be down converted to HD, okay? So it's massive what you get here. Well, obviously we do have the audio connectivity because we said the camera offers XLR input, 2 of them, but when it's paired with the fiber converter, you get an additional 2. So that becomes 4 channels of audio, okay? So we'll fish that back from the back of the unit here, okay? And also for people that are using tollback system which are not maybe, you know, which are not within the SDI, so if you're using analog sort of tollback system, think about Clearcom, for example, Riddle, Holy Land, whatever, you can wire up a DB25 cable and take use of the analog tollback rather than the SDI, okay? So it's plenty of, you know, option to kind of like tie this workflow to your needs, okay? But let's connect it up quickly. So I've got the camera here. Well, as you can see, I need this massive cable, okay? There you go, that goes on the front, okay? All right, let's be quick here. Okay. And then that goes obviously on these connector here. Again, there are little caps here to keep it protected, which is good. And they are also marked so you don't really start banging this cable in and try to, okay? So they are pretty much, you know, signs for. So I'm gonna get the power because, as I said, I need to send some power somewhere. So I'm gonna power. Let me see if it's switched off. It is. I'm gonna power this studio fiber converter. Okay. I'm gonna switch it on. Okay. And now this the studio fiber converter is initiating a sort of like integrity check, okay? And when I say integrity check, what the studio converter is doing is checking that the cable is fine. If there is anything wrong with this cable, it will basically stop the whole system. Why? Because inside this cable we got 2 lines of power. One is low energy, that means it's just running few checks, and the other one instead is driving 200 volts because we need to cover the distance, the 2 kilometers, okay? So if for some reason this cable is damaged, it will never send the high voltage, okay? Otherwise you get fried, simple as, okay? If you fancy that, that's the best way to do it, okay? But it won't allow that, it won't be on us, okay? We won't allow that. So, but yeah, so let's connect my B4 lens, again, very simple system here. Okay, let's connect it up. I said it was easy. Prove it. Okay, that's it. Okay, the iris connector goes in. Brilliant. Now, I can actually, because I got the signal back on the camera from the fiber converter, I get my green lights here. So my power is there. If it wasn't power, obviously it was red. Or at least if you had low power, it would be red. But now the power is correctly running at 200 volts. And this one is telling me, yeah, the fiber as well is connected. Fine, perfect. So now I'm able to turn on the camera. Okay, so the camera will come up. What else am I missing? Well, guess, the SDI cable. So I really need to pick up those two SDI cables that I got here. And as I said, I'm going to connect it, rather than the camera this time, to the studio fiber converter. Okay, pretty easy. Again, they're all marked up. So I got the SDI output here and the SDI input right here. And again, let's see what I get. Okay, if I'm actually correct, you should be able to see on the fiber converter. Some of you might be able to see in the front row. I got already my image. Okay, so I know the signal is reaching the studio fiber converter. If it doesn't get to the switcher, there's something else at the back of the unit that's not working. Okay, so technically, if I go to the Ursa broadcast again now, I am using the fiber connectivity. Okay, which is great. So what about now if you're really not in this kind of market? Okay, so I like the idea of the Ursa broadcast, I like the idea of the fiber, but really my business is more like into this area, the studio camera, right? Okay, it's not really what I need. I don't do any ENG, it's a small venue. I much rather have, you know, an operator here, there, and keep it very tight. Okay, that's fine. What can we do to offer the same sort of flexibility that we got with the fiber into this world? Okay, well, we thought about it and we came out with a sort of solution that will require this time yet another converter. Okay, which is great. It's this little converter here, but it has a different nature. Okay, it works very similarly to the studio fiber converter, but in a slightly different way, because it takes advantage of this, an RJ45, a normal Ethernet cable, widely available everywhere, cheap. Okay, and yes, it can do pretty much the same sort of like job. Okay, where do I connect it? Obviously, I'll connect it to the Ethernet input, RJ45. I get exactly the same. Let me just change on that. You might be able to see if I actually switch it on the camera. I got the same connector, camera input and camera output. I get obviously the RJ45 here. I got my analog connectivity, my reference in and out, my time code. So I got everything I need, same as the studio converter. Okay, so it does pretty much the same job. So let's connect it up. Again, with the RJ45, which is copper-based type of cable, the limits of this cable by nature is roughly 100 meter. Okay, but we can probably cover something like 60, 70 meter, running up to 4K, right? So if you paid attention earlier, when I mentioned SDI, what was the limit there? 60, 70 meters. So we actually have a very, very sort of like affordable solution here to drive a similar workflow that you will only be able to reach either with SDI or fiber. Okay, so let's have a look at how we connect this. Again, we can technically connect this. Okay, that's fine, that's firing up. Okay, and return input. Yeah, I think there's something disconnected that side of the switcher. It doesn't matter because I can prove that on the monitor here. Okay, there is something in this wire here which is not connected to the main production area that we got over there. Okay, but I do have picture over here. I do have audio, so I know these two are talking to each other. Okay, it was a shame because I would love to show you on the big screen. However, as I mentioned earlier, this is not quite a complete chain here, because I said that the fiber can also sort of distribute power. Okay, so the idea being that technically, if I pull this power cable here, the camera will still work on the single Ethernet cable. Same thing, at a fraction of the price. Okay, so that is brilliant. So we do have somehow the same sort of workflow that we would get over fiber now on an Ethernet connected camera. And I get exactly the same thing. I do get the 2 program return, I do get the tally, the tollback, the intercom, but this time traveling on this RJ45 cable. Okay, which is great. Later on, in a later session, Chris will demonstrate another way you can connect this camera directly to the switcher. But I'm not going to spoil it, I'm going to leave it to him. But I think we can sum it up by saying, yes, this camera is excellent, same sort of like technology, same sort of sensor. These two are exactly the same, even in terms of colorimetry, so you can literally pair these 2 cameras. I've seen so many installations where you got maybe the main camera with the B4 lens attached to it, and then you got maybe a couple of small studio camera closer to the podium or closer to the stage, and they can really work well together because of the color science is exactly the same. They got same sort of technology in terms of like ND filters, dynamic range, so it's very much similar. They have both SDI in and outs. They have the ability of connecting to a more modern or a different alternative fiber connectivity or Ethernet. So we really cater these 2 systems for anybody, okay? Any level, any budget. So you will find your way into the switcher with 2 fantastic systems. Now, if you got any question, we can go through a Q&A session now. Otherwise, then we can move next door and we can look at the cameras at the stage. So thank you so much for these 45 minutes you dedicated to me. And I'm going to dedicate another 15 minutes to you if you got any question. Thank you so much. So, Chris, you're going to help us out with that? Yep. So, any question from you? Got one question here, one question then over there.
There's the first question.
Right here, the gentleman here, then another one over there. Don't worry.
Can I address it to
Oh,
you?
hang on.
Maybe it's for everybody's interest. You can talk to everybody. Yeah.
Yo, Tresha.
Okay.
Just a quick question on the SDI. Excuse
Yeah.
my ignorance. With you said 60 to 70 meters. Is that like the information moving on the distance of the cable,
Yes.
or is that sending the signal out like to the world? I know. I'm just asking.
No. That's all right. The SDI will cover as a distance in cable, okay, from your camera to the switcher or whatever distributes the signal for 60 meters, okay. Whatever you go into the world with, you know, a switch or something else, it's not relying on the cable itself, okay. So this is the cable length that you can use.
And
okay?
then the in and out connection
Yeah.
of the SDI.
Yeah.
You said that I do take it that must be coming from the actual control.
In that sort of sense, when you're working with Blackmagic Design in our ecosystem, if you get a return feed from a switcher such as the ATEM Stream, or in this case, the ATEM Television Studio 8, that will enable those features that I mentioned, tollback, intercom, tally light, to come back to the camera. Otherwise, you can interconnect the camera with any other third-party switcher, but obviously the return feed will not give you any of those benefits, okay?
Okay, the reason why I was asking that because I'm an audio guy, and in terms with sound, I know if you get
all embedded
one signal, like let's say drums, bass, and whatever, then it's kind of difficult to work it in the studio when you're like mixing and mastering.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to know in terms of that information. I still can control different elements.
Totally. So
Okay.
you do have audio embedded into that. Actually, Chris is going to show a few things when you use it, when you're using the camera in combination with the ATEM Television Studio, which has some really hefty features in there coming from the Fairlight world. So yes, you can definitely control many aspects of the audio coming from that camera into a switcher.
Thank you,
See
sir.
you later. We got a question over there, the gentleman over there, then there was another question right there. Yeah.
Put your hand up.
Question here.
Sit there. Yeah, there you go. Cool.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for the nice presentation.
No worries.
I just got one question. So, on the studio camera rig,
Yeah.
do I have complete control of the camera with my Ethernet cable? Will I be able to change iris, all of that
Totally.
information? So if I put that thing on a Jimmy chip, I can just run the Ethernet cable. on it?
Absolutely.
and then I presume then the same will be for the fiber cable.
Of course, that's a given.
I just
okay.
wanted to check that. Thank you
Now,
very much.
absolutely, you do get everything, including the talkback, including the camera control. Okay, everything comes within the same cable. So once the handshaking is done, yes, you get every sort of control. Okay. More questions coming from there.
Thank you very much. My question is, as regards transmission,
Yeah.
does the SDI has any advantage in terms of timing for transmission? Like,
Yes.
for instance, you have like some 10 seconds delay.
Of course,
Like,
10 seconds would be way too much. It would be abysmal. So no, you're right. The SDIs carry some advantage when we're talking about our system. Both of them, when you are working over SDI, we kind of like work within a frame delay, 1 frame delay. Okay, so that's what we sort of like guarantee. Okay, when you're working over Ethernet, that's a different story. Okay, when you're working with the Ethernet through the converter, we're still around the 1 frame. When you are working in a different way, when you're connecting the Ethernet cable to the switcher, which is something that we're going to show maybe later, there is some sort of delay which is inherited by the internet provider. Okay, so, but yes, technically, when you're working with SDI against, let's say, HDMI, you do have an advantage. HDMI needs to go through an handshaking process, so whatever is the receiving device, it needs to read through a matrix and say, right, what can you support? 1080i 50? No, I can't. 1080i 25? Maybe 2398? Yes. This kind of like question, this matrix that needs to match takes time. And that would be 1, 2, 3 seconds, depending on what you're connecting to, right? So the bigger the matrix is into your receiving device, the longer it takes to lock into the first available, highest quality possible that you get, okay? So that's an advantage that you get over SDI as well. Thank you for the question. Very interesting.
On
There, gentleman over there.
There's steps.
Over to you, yeah. Back to baseband into my switcher. So there is nothing IP based in between. So there is not a network switch in between. Maybe. Right, Chris? But yeah, we'll see in the next question, in the next session what I'm referring to. Okay? Any more questions? Here, right there. Yeah, come to the steps. Come to the steps.
Thank you so much and good morning. Just based on his question about the SDI cables.
Yeah.
So for a low budget type of situation, if one isn't able to get like your wireless transmitters,
Okay.
are you able to, since your maximum on SDI is 70, are you able to join 2 cables, and is that advisable? Would it
Of
affect
course.
quality?
I'll give you 2 options. Anytime you're using an SDI cable and you're using, for example, a converter, like Blackmagic or any other converter, generally these converters can reclock the signal. Okay? So there's a reclock into these converters which allows you to, again, start from there again and run another length of distance, so another stent. So you do 100 meters, then you clock it in, then it's another 100 meters, and you keep clocking it. But obviously the disadvantage of that is that you got more failure points. Okay, that's why people tend to use, in that situation when you have to cover long distance, fiber. So what's the other option? Just because I mentioned it, we do also sell other type of converters, such as SDI to fiber, that are tiny, very tiny. I think it's something like $35 or something, no more than that. And what you can do, you can actually use a normal, say, call it normal, LC fiber connection, okay? These are way, way cheaper than the SIMT fiber here. Actually, the SIMT fiber, it's a bit of a cheat because inside the SIMT fiber itself, they have 2 of those LC cables. In fact, the receiver that we got inside here and the receiver at the other side are normal SFP's receiver, okay? And our converter works in exactly the same way. So technically, you can extend that using a SDI to fiber converter. You run the distance, same distance that you can run with a normal SIMT fiber. And then at the other side, you reconvert it back with a similar converter, which does the other way around. So the fiber into the SDI. So that is the way in between. If you're not in the market for SIMT, but you see the benefit of fiber, and you have to overcome the distance without reclocking, then you can go with the fiber. Okay? Any more questions?
And power.
Oh yeah, and power, Chris, you're right. Yeah, that's a good point actually, because the SIM carries power, the converter instead will require you to power your camera and the converter itself. Okay, cool. Any more? Over there.
Steps for happy days. This is great. I'm burning off that curry I had last night.
Yeah. Sweat it out.
Morning, sir. I was just curious. So let's say you're on that studio camera and you're powering it via Ethernet.
Yeah.
And let's say maybe you wanna, in the future, you'd wanna get like a controller. Would
Okay.
you still power the camera through the Ethernet, or would you need to get a
Absolutely
separate power?
fine. This is a class 7 PoE connector which can drive up to 75 watts. So that's absolutely fine. Those one are USB-C, no more than 5 watts. So there's plenty of room to drive anything else into it. So don't worry about it. That's absolutely fine. Anything else? Over there. We've got time, yeah? Yeah, we're doing good with time.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for the training.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask in regards to, you said something earlier about the HDMI cable being a disadvantage. So let's say I have a studio production and I have like 3 cameras.
Yeah.
So can the 3 cameras be connected smartly to the output? So the feeds that I could change could be without the cables, people tripping over the cables or stuff.
Okay.
So are the cameras smart cameras that could control directly to the...
In that regard, no, you can't. The camera needs to be somehow hardwired, okay? Or, as I said, there is not some sort of like RX or TX sort of connection, so there is not RF transmission, if you know what I'm saying. Yes, you can put some sort of transmitter, like an Holyland maybe, or a Bose or Teradek, whatever you want to call it, and send that, but then you need to have a receiving base close to your switcher. So yes, you can bolt on a RF converter, doing SDI to HDMI or HDMI to HDMI, whatever, travel over radio frequencies, and then having the base close to your switcher. That would be a third-party implementation, okay? Then yes, there is another way with our camera, especially with the broadcast camera, where you can technically, again, that will be in the next presentation that Chris is going to run, there will be a way to sort of connect the camera somehow to the switcher from a remote location, okay? If you're thinking about having this camera completely disconnected, but if you think about smart connectivity, like having a phone with an application into it, no, there is not such a thing, okay? You still rely on normal, radio frequencies or SDI or HDMI based, okay? Anything else? Any more curiosity around the product or what it can do? Over there and over there, yeah. Easy.
Good morning. I just wanted to ask if there are specific transmitters and receivers that are compatible with Blackmagic, because I understand that it's not every device that is compatible.
When you saying transceiver and receiver of what? Fiber or video signal?
Video signal.
Video signal.
Yes.
So you're talking about what I just mentioned, something like
Yeah.
receiver. Well, anything off the shelf that can support SIM-T sort of like standard, because we adhere to these kind of standards, will do. So if I got a video standard capable device which can output a 1080 signal, okay, 1920 by 1080 or 4K standard Ultra HD, they will work. Okay. If you start sending something like VGA or something more like in the line of graphics sort of resolution, 1440 by 1080 or 200 by 1080, well, those are not considered by us standard resolution, or at least they won't work with our product because they are broadcast sort of like connectivity, okay, and resolutions. So in terms of what you're going to get, yes, you can get anything in the market. Probably Teradek is one of the most famous, but Holyland is an equally affordable and quite capable solution, okay? So, but yeah, there are plenty. If you talk to any of our reseller in the showroom, then it will tell you anything about it. They've got plenty of accessories for this kind of connectivity, okay?
Okay, just to add on that,
Yeah.
which brands specifically would you recommend?
I wouldn't recommend any specifically, but if I could not, okay, I cannot, right? But I think if there is something that you need to pay attention to, is the latency, okay? So whenever you look at these kind of objects or device or third party, look at the latency figures, okay? Some of them nowadays can get very close if actually giving you 0 latency, okay? That's what you kind of want, right? The lowest latency possible, right? That's the thing. And obviously the coverage as well, probably you know how distant you're gonna be from that.
I can probably add something there as well. So, well, yeah, I am still impartial, but I just know
Impartial,
that I
please.
am. Stage Audio Works are, they do distribute Holyland, so they're very familiar with that as a solution. So if there's anything that you have questions about, I would probably suggest that you grab one of the Stage Audio Works team, and I'm sure they'll be able to give you some information. Any more questions?
Well, yeah, to add on that,
Yeah.
Chris obviously was mentioning that, don't forget that whenever you do this, whenever you go through an RF or a sort of converter like that, transceiver, receiver, still you're losing all that connectivity, the return feed connectivity that we were mentioning earlier, so tollback, intercom, tally, they're all gone. There is a brand, which is quite expensive, and they're still working on it, where they're trying to sort of like using the same sort of protocol and getting this information back onto our switcher and into the camera as well, okay? But they're very expensive, they're also quite big to mount on the back of the units, either by V-lock or something, but it's a big box that needs to be paired with it, so really it's not comfortable to have it, okay? However, we do have a way to do so with one object in particular in our line of product, which is the ATEM streaming bridge, okay? This product allows you to stream, okay, an RTMP signal to it, okay? I haven't talked about one of the features of this camera, which is quite spectacular, and also this camera here, okay? These two cameras have an encoder inbuilt, okay? So that means that when they are connected via the Ethernet cable, and in that case for the URSA broadcast, well, there is no Ethernet cable on the URSA broadcast, we got a USB-C port. If you use a USB-C to Ethernet adapter, both camera has an encoder. That means that I can accept an RTMP URL, okay, target that, and stream directly. So technically, I can stream from camera to platform. So I can go to YouTube, I can go to Twitch, I can go to anything. The ATEM streaming bridge that I'm mentioning will also be a receiving platform, let's call it. It's a receiving device, in that case, it's not a platform, but it's RTMP based. What is the advantage of that though? This little ATEM streaming bridge has an SDI output, okay? So it's receiving this signal from anywhere in the world, because it's RTMP, converting it into baseband, reaching my ATEM. Great. And now with the latest driver, if you send back the program into this box, into the reference input of this ATEM streaming bridge, then guess what? Everything goes back over the internet to the camera. And now we solve that issue, because with our ATEM streaming bridge, we preserve exactly one line of intercom, okay? And that's pretty much what you want, okay? And the camera control. The only thing that you're not gonna get is the program return feed, okay? So the video image, okay? But the rest of it, you do have the camera control, okay? So that is the...
So this is really designed to be a compact cinema-based camera. You can see how we've got this rigged up here. We've got a set of bars, we've got it connected, I believe it's an Easy-Rig cage. There's an optional EVF which you can bolt on directly to the camera. Again, we've got it set up on a rig here.
Because I even asked me yesterday about if you're working with that magic or instead of color management, different color because you're working completely flat for color time. You don't have to worry about everything together. Give you that flat. And because you're working on the company of the trading. to review the cases. We also have extras on this. So this is Black Knight. Definitely telling you because it's a lot of that. Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't know what we're going to do. So that goes into the camera use. But here we've got the send and return and running from our system into the camera, and we use that return again to trigger the turning
And now I'm working in HD with 12K files, monitoring in 4K, and I would do everything, including my color correction, my editing, anything. And I would only go to UHD when I'm ready to deliver. So I'd go to UHD. That's what it is. But the proxies
This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape sets the mood of a scene, or captures the full extent of nature's fury.
This is new one. I think so. It's 18.1. It's new one came out. Voice isolation. So you're recording some wireless traffic over here, and it's nuts when it's just one control. Like you see the example of that sound, but get it.
We have a good.
Let me see. M series. Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Give me a second.
Yeah, I go from anywhere M series, M1. I think it's on here. Let me see if I can find.
Well, I'm not going to advertise it to myself.
So basically what you're doing, we have to, depending on the computer you're sending from. So maybe if you decided to connect me from the mic, right? And then that means you connect your transcription from the mic to here. That means if you're using HDMI.
If you don't do it, who do you? But if I don't do it, exactly, no one's going to do it. So what's the...
So this is using SDI.
Because with me it's like what in the part-time
HDMI
are you saying?
I know, but that's why I try to like fight for like the collective. Like, that's why I didn't see what I said with it's the collective, because you guys, I see you guys. Let's be real. Carrot is on M Street. Exactly, and then when anything bad happens, who's the person who's there? It's me. So I see the bad editing, problems that we have and stuff. So I've got to be like.
There's a lot of connections that are going on. Okay. You're doing a great job. But why are they only doing it within the units? Because they can always have a software.
But I also had a lot of questions regarding the mixer. Why they do it?
This is called a 2ME panel, so as you can see this is the switcher, it's just purely just a control panel for this switcher that's in the rack here. So it's got two different mix engines, so it means you can have two different program feeds on the same number of cameras. So if you're going to, let's say, have an iMac and a you don't necessarily want to show a big wide shot in the room because it doesn't make any sense. So you can have the same person mixing broadcast and in the room on the same switcher with the same number of inputs.
You want to make it just so the darkest parts of the room, you want to add maybe pink or blue or something. Those darker parts. Yeah. You can adjust it with this, but you can do it on the physical part instead of just doing it on.
So you can see as I feed it here, it's changing on the monitor.
See?
But similarly, how I can do it with the software, you can do it on this walls.
Have you ever taken a picture before? Yeah, the hue, the saturation.
In Africa, in terms of region, but the operation is run by stage of the work. Okay? If you need to understand about anything related to commercial aspects, they will be.
You don't need to upload it, you just need you do it on your own. So say you go
You just help them out during these events, kind of like
So any A7S or A7S barbecue or any of those, they all do both. And so I think to make it flexible, you want to maybe take a still while you're on set, while you're shooting. Most people don't, so that it's just a bonus. No, it's not a frame grab, it's a proper photo. It's a still, a 6K
Work with the UK and Ireland, so I manage the UK and Ireland from pre-sales consultancy. So I work with everyone from an end user all the way up to a big broadcaster looking at our products against a requirement, potentially looking to integrate around third-party products. So it's a really exciting role. Every day is different, every day is a school day, so we're always learning, which is always fun. Bit of background before that, I was at a UK reseller, so I was selling into educational accounts within the UK, and then previously to that I was teaching at a university film production. So my main background is digital cinema. I've worked in features and shorts, promos, music videos, but then I've also worked in live production. Some of the feature set within these new ISO range of switches, when we released it, I had no idea of the workflow, and it absolutely blew my mind in terms of being in production, working on things, working really long days, and then wrangling loads of data at night, trying to create rough edits and things like that. The ISO workflow in particular for me is a game changer. So if you're not aware of the ISO workflow, or maybe you've kind of seen little bits of it, hopefully today you'll get a really good understanding of what it can do, the power of it, and in terms of efficiency, the kind of turnaround time is absolutely phenomenal. So, like my colleague Chris just said, we have released 3 new switches. These are our latest switches within the ATEM range. The 4K8 is due to be shipping soon. The HD8 and the HD8 ISO are shipping now. The focus of today is all going to be around the HD8 ISO, and what I'm really going to try and do is just give you the standout features that are found within this switcher that you don't find in any of our other switcher ranges. So, always a good question to start with is a fantastic upgrade path if people are working with those ATEM mini switches, the ATEM SDI switches. you may have already found working with those switches that you've kind of hit the level of what that switcher can do. And in terms of operation, where this really shines is the fact it's got real-time contextual menus that give you live feedback of what it is you're doing. So let's take an A10 Mini for example. You can adjust audio settings on an A10 Mini. You can adjust level settings of your audio embedded coming in, but there's no real-time feedback of saying what that audio is being set to. So again, unless you've got an incredibly good memory, which I don't, every button is taking it up 2 dB, and to remember what that setting is without going into the software, you just kind of lose that control. This has real-time contextual menus on LCDs that gives you that instant feedback of all of those parameters that we're affecting. And we're going to go into that in some detail. What I'm going to start with is just take you through the hardware overview of what we've managed to do with this switcher. Now, everyone who works in live production knows live production is super critical, right? You get one chance to do these things, so to have some of the connectivity that this switcher has, to have redundancy with power and things like that can be super, super important. I always use the example because I'm a huge footy fan back in the UK. You know, if Sky, for example, on their Super Sunday have not got their broadcast ready for the 4:30 kickoff, that game kicks off. They do not delay the kickoff for the broadcast. So again, you know, it's truly, truly, you know, it's adrenaline rush. It's incredibly pressurized within live production. So what we managed to do with this switcher, hopefully, is make the operator's life a little bit easier. And the idea being, because you've got all of the connectivity on the back of the switcher, this very much is pick up that switcher, get to location, drop it down, connectivity into the back, and just get running with it. So we'll look at that in some detail after a little bit of time. But what I want to do to start with is just take you through some of the hardware that you can see on the top of the front of the panel. So again, A10 Mini users, A10 SDI users will be used to one row for all of their preview and program selection. What we have here is a more broadcast standard, a more professional level of operation, and we have a dedicated preview bus and a dedicated program bus. That means I can be starting to switch on my preview row, or I can do direct cutting on my program row. And that just, again, is a more broadcast sort of professional way of working, and it just starts to separate out. You know, you can start to, you know, hit the wrong buttons on the A10 Minis and things like that, especially if you're in direct cut mode. The way in which live production should generally work is that you are always previewing angles before you're bringing it live. Because again, the last thing you want to do is bring a camera online that's, you know, out of focus, or the color shading's wrong, or the framing's really bad on it. So again, to be able to preview it, and then again, what we have on here is talkback integrated into that. We can speak to our operators and ensure that, again, you know, they're reframing shots, they're focusing up and doing a lot of work around that, just to ensure that obviously whatever is going out on your program, which is obviously your broadcast output, is going to be the best shot selection, and again, everything is nice, in focus, aesthetically pleasing. Another thing that we have is really good with the switcher is a source and macro selector up here. So anytime we go into, for example, our upstream keys up on the control panel up here, this will instantly light up and give you key selection for source selection. So again, A10 Minis, A10 SDIs, you can get access to the first upstream key on that unit. But any of those other upstream keys, if you're working with the Extreme, which has 4, you're jumping straight into the software. And what this is all about is trying to keep everything hardware based. A lot of what we'll show today is ways of setting up the switcher pre-production, and then genuinely you just need the switcher. You don't actually need to be working in the software. There are things within the software that you might need depending on the type of productions you're doing. Things like moving your media players around, your media pool, bringing in graphics, things like that. But again, depending on the production, you might actually just be able to work just generally straight on the hardware and no need for an extra machine in there. Moving on. Another thing, this is brand new to any of our switches. We've never done this on any of our control panels before in terms of having a dedicated row for this. We've got AUX selection. This can be really good if you're doing some big live events where you're pushing out imagery to big IMAG screens, some LCD projection, anything like that. I can take, this unit has 2 auxiliary outputs. I've got my source selection of my first 8 inputs. I've got program, multi-view and preview, and it just means I've got really fast access to be able to switch what those auxes are doing. A lot of times in production, you might be sending out a broadcast, but actually what you're monitoring locally in the venue has to be different. Maybe you don't want the graphics on your live projection, your big IMAG projectors, whatever. this gives me a detailed way to be able to control those straight from the panel. Number 4 is our recording and streaming. So we've got a little source selection up here where we can start to activate our live streaming, activate our internal recording, and a new one is to grab still, and we've got a switch button which allows us to potentially switch between our internal storage on the unit and any storage we've got attached via USB-C. The grab still can be really cool. I use an example, I've used it recently where we were doing like a bit of a corporate event, and what we did was we got the business to basically pump in a feed from a laptop of their logo. I just grabbed the still of that logo coming in, that dropped directly into my media pool, and it meant any time I needed to bring up that logo maybe to start the show when people were just coming in, I just had it just directly in my media pool without having to kind of get access, get people to send me stuff across the internet or what have you. Number 5 is our upstream and downstream keys. So again, I always mention this against an A10 Mini, A10 SDI because it kind of gives that logical upgrade path. But we've got dedicated control of all of our 4 upstream keys on here. So we can start to preview our keys, we can tie them to the transition, and then we can bring them all on air together. And the same goes with our downstream keys down here. So we've got our downstream keys. Now, I always kind of want to reference, does everyone know what an upstream key is, what a downstream key is, and what they're generally used for? Yeah? Just for anyone who's unsure, and they're sometimes called USKs, DSKs, I always want to make sure I'm explaining things just in case people aren't really understanding what we're talking about. I always use an example of, imagine how rain hits a lake, right? It hits right at the top of the mountain. There's a little lake up in the mountain. It's coming all the way downstream, and then the lake essentially is my production. That's my final output. If I'm doing my upstream keys, I'm doing them upstream of anything that's happening on my final broadcast output. Generally, the types of upstream keys that are most used within our switches are our chroma keys. So if you're working with green screen, you'd be using an upstream key to basically sample that chroma and then basically eradicate the chroma so you can start to layer up images. Think about Photoshop, think about the way you're layering within Photoshop. And another one is our picture-in-picture. That gets used all the time. So I always use an example of gamers. Gamers use picture-in-pictures all the time where they've got their main output of their game and then they've got a little picture-in-picture of themselves actually operating that game. They're all found within our upstream keys. And then downstream keys are generally your graphics, your lower third titles, your bugs, things like that, because you want to ensure that that is going to be the final layer before that broadcast output, because the last thing you want is your lower third to come up and then something come in front of it. So that is my final layer before I'm hitting that broadcast out. And again, like I said, we've got control of just bringing them directly on air on a cut, or we can tie them to transitions and then auto it. The beauty of that is I can tie all my upstream keys to the transition, I could tie both of my downstream keys, and then when I auto transition, that's going to auto transition to the preview shot I've got loaded up here, but it's going to bring all of those on air all together in one, and then I can bring them all off air at once as well. 6 is our transition block, and again, a bit of an upgrade for any A10 Mini users because they don't have any sort of T-bar control. But if you've worked with the older A10 television studios, they used to have like a little fader, like an audio fader for your T-bar. This is a proper broadcast professional T-bar, really nice for operation, and this is really tactical in terms of all the operation that you get from here. We've got transition selection, so I can move between my dips, my mix, my wipes, my DVEs if I'm doing some fancy graphic wipes, things like that. And then I've got my straight cut and my auto button. So as it is here, you know, if I've got my camera 6 in preview and my camera 1 live, if I auto transition, it's going to give me whatever I've got in my transition block selected as my transition style, and it's going to auto that at a duration that I've got full control over. Or I just do a direct cut, and that's just going to direct cut between those 2 inputs. Moving on from the panel, let's look at the back of the unit. So again, what we've really seen with this unit compared with DB is going. You can see on cam 3 there is a little headphone icon. We've got solo source connection. So if I solo that, it means I'm soloing that source for monitoring, so I can just start to, because again, looking at levels is great for actual broadcastability, but what is in that audio? What am I actually picking up within that audio? Harking back to that idea of having all this beautiful product portfolio that we do, we've now brought in Fairlight control from Fairlight that sits within DaVinci Resolve into some of our switches. this is hugely powerful for being able to manipulate that audio and be able to kind of master the best potential mix in a live environment without having to do any post-production. We now have 6-band parametric EQ on all inputs. If anyone's not aware of what we're able to do with that, we're able to basically start to manipulate certain frequencies within that audio signal. Use the perfect example, live production is always that thing where you rock up to an event, you plonk your ATEM down, and you realise the aircon is kicking out. And there is no way to turn the aircon off because everyone wants to be nice, cool and happy, and they don't care about you and your ATEM doing your little live production. So what we can do with the EQ on a 6-band parametric is we can start to reduce certain frequencies. Now, the frequency of a hum of an aircon compared to the frequency of my dialogue is massively different. So I can isolate that bottom end frequency, which is that low hum, and I can just start to eradicate it. So again, to be able to have all that control in a live environment is just amazing. And again, like I said, we brought this in recently, and it just gives so much control. And as a user, all that flexibility to really fine tune that audio, because again, audio is so important, you know. Half the time on audio, it's actually, you know, the narrative of what's being pumped. So to have clear, understandable audio is hugely important. We've then got other control. So I'm in level at the moment. I've got pan control when I click down to this button, and again, I've just got a little source selection to do this. So I can pan control, simple left and right panning of my audio. Again, when I'm pumping out to speakers, I might want to start to mix that. Again, panning can be really dynamic to really bring someone into a situation. Again, digital cinema days, all about mixing, you know, 5.1 control, things like that, really bringing someone in. There's our EQ control, so again, anytime I hit any of these buttons, it's going to give me that live feedback of that menu I'm selecting. Anytime you can see it up on screen here, any of these little dots on any of these, it means there's another setting that's living behind that. We've got an Alt button that just sits just slightly underneath here on the panel. Anytime I hit that Alt button, it's basically going to flip between. You can just see a little bit on the LCD there. I'm just flipping between whatever is sat within that menu system. We've got expanders, compressors, limiters and gates. I'm not going to go massively into that because I feel like some of the other stuff within this session is really cool, mind-blowingly cool to be fair, if you agree with me. But again, having all that control, things like limiters for broadcast safe levels, hugely important. When I'm talking about something I'm not that passionate about, I tend to just go down a little bit because I'm not that interested. And then when I'm talking about the ISO workflow, I am booming because it is mind-blowingly cool. And again, having that control to ensure that I'm not going to distort that audio when I'm getting into ISO workflow is obviously amazingly important to ensure that I'm getting broadcast safe levels out of the switcher. This is just incredible. We've got camera control, like McKelly was talking about on that return feed. We've got camera control of our cameras. Again, ATEM Mini users, you might have been using a couple of up and down arrows. You'll be jumping in the software and doing all that control in the software. We've now got all of that control in this contextual menu, and all I need to do is hit this cam button here, and that's going to give me all of that control. So let's have a little play with one of our cameras. We've got our pocket camera live, so I'm going to just select my pocket camera by just this little selection button here. There's my iris control, so I can just start to remotely affect the iris. Gain control, pedestal control for my black and white levels. I've got zoom and focus control, so I can start to refocus my cameras remotely. You can see I'm just knocking that out of focus, and then I'm bringing it back into focus nicely. And again, you know, if this is a one-person operation where it's just you rocking up with a switcher and all your camera operators are really far away from you, being able to do all that racking remotely is hugely important. We brought in from DaVinci YRGB control, so we've got full YRGB shading of the cameras. I can affect just my red channels, my green channels, my blue channels, my Y channel being the luminance, so the brightness level of that incoming source. If I've got zoom lenses attached that have servos on, like the studio camera, for example, or my ISO broadcast here, I've got remote zoom control of that lens, so I can start to reframe the shot remotely as well. And again, what I'm going to do is just use this pop here to move between those different settings. So there's my RGB control, and again, it's split over lift, gamma, and gain, so I can just affect my highlights of my shot, my midtones, and my shadows. Again, just expanding that control out to affect just certain areas of my image. Page 3, I've got white balance control, I've got contrast control, I've got saturation control, I've got sensitivity control, ND filter control. So again, the new Studio Camera 6K has got motorized NDs in there. I can affect those from here, so I can start to add ND in if I want to. Maybe it is that for this next shot, I want to blow out the background and get a really shallow depth of field, but as soon as I bring that iris down to like 2.8, I'm actually just blowing the shot out. That's where I'll be adding those NDs in. So again, I've got all that control here. I'm seeing it on my multi-view, and yeah, I'm just nailing the shot. The next thing I want to talk about is our live streaming. So the unit has an onboard encoder for live streaming directly from the unit. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump out of this, and I'm going to just go full screen onto my. In fact, yeah, we'll go full screen onto the Mac. Just give me 2 seconds. I just need to change the way my displays are set on here. But again, onboard encoding for live streaming. So again, people that have worked with the A10 minis, the A10 SDIs, the revolutionary thing when we released those switches was that it allowed for direct streaming from the unit. We can do that with this, and I'm just going to mirror my displays and jump in to our software control. So again, any A10 users will be aware of our software control. I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you've got any questions about the software stuff and where everything sits within it, jump onto the demo station over there, and one of my colleagues or me myself will take you through some of this stuff. But in our output tab here, we've got our live stream settings and we've got our record settings. I'm going to go through both of these now. Straight out the box, we get access to all of those platforms, just like I said, straight out of the box with no additional need for setup on these. And these are all RTMP based platforms. So it's only RTMP that we support at the moment. Hopefully that might change in the future. We might start to bring in some different protocols for streaming, but it's all RTMP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select YouTube, and I'm just going to jump into my hugely popular YouTube channel. Pretty much YouTube famous these days. And I'm going to go up here and go into my Go Live. Now I think I had 1 follower at one point. I quickly realised that was my mum. And she didn't even like my content, so she's left. So I'm now back down to 0 followers. So I obviously joke about being completely YouTube famous. So jumping in, what I've done is go live. So I'm now in my YouTube studio area. Always wait for your bars to refresh. You might have seen a little red bar just fly across the top of the YouTube studio. What I'm going to do is, this is my streaming key down here. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to reset that streaming key. That gives me a fresh streaming key. I always recommend doing that if you've not been into YouTube for a while. When you reset it again, that bar will fly across. Wait for that to happen. I'm going to copy that. So I'm just copying that streaming key. I'm going to go back into my A10 software control. And essentially what a streaming key is, it's giving the destination to the A10 of where it needs to go to. It's like an address, it's like a phone number. It's just a directive to say to the A10, make sure you stream up to my YouTube. I've just pasted that streaming key in. And for today, I know a lot of people are kind of flying around on the Wi-Fi and stuff, so I'm just going to go into my streaming low settings. Streaming low is kind of 3 to 4.5 megabytes per second, so it's a real low bandwidth, allows me to pretty much in most places with an alright internet connection, allow me to get up and running on my live stream. Now, the idea again of this being pure hardware, again, what we can do is just take this without a laptop. This is my pre-production. I would set this up before I get to location or before I'm going to start my live stream. And then what I can do is just straight from the panel here is hit on air. That's going to basically start that live stream up. You'll get a bit of a flash, and that is always panic moment, because it's like, is it actually going to go up? I've got my little display status tick box on, allowing me to just get a little display down here. Also on my multi-view, I've got my streaming status set into my multi-view so I can see that I'm actually getting that stream coming through. On the multi-view setting, you get your cache, and basically it's worth noting, and I think I might be able to just bring that up quickly. You can see down here that we're now on air, and this is my cache, and my cache is okay. Anytime that cache starts to build up, panic stations, right? If anyone's aware of live streaming, it's panic stations, because basically what that is saying is your streaming setting is too high for your internet connection. So we're having to cache that data. Cache normally only goes one way, unless you've got a very variable internet connection. As soon as that cache hits 100%, stream dies. So anytime, again, if you're doing, remote stuff at locations you've never been to before and you're unaware of internet connection, always recommend getting there quickly, having a little play around. Google search internet speed checker. You'll be able to find loads of internet speed checkers once you're wired in, and that will give you your up and down speed. Obviously we are uploading, so just look at your upload speed that you're getting from that internet speed checker, and then set your streaming settings against that. I can then go back into my YouTube, and there you can see that stream is just pumping out on the right hand side there. Just going to flip back to my pocket cam. Oh no, sorry, I'm going to go to my PC. So yeah, stream is pumping out, all good. I'm now just going to kill that stream and end it within YouTube. And now what we're going to talk about is, I'm pretty sure you're all aware, my favourite bit of this session, and that is my ISO workflow. I'm going to nip back into the software. One thing that's worth noting, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, my record program output of my recording and my live stream are attached to the same encoder. So whatever I set within that quality of my live stream is what my program record is going to be recorded at. All of my isolated recordings, so ISO stands for isolated recordings, and that basically means when I activate ISO recording, I'm not only recording my program output, I'm recording every input coming in as an isolated feed. Obviously that's going to take up way more storage, so only do it if you are actually needing all of those isolated feeds. But again, one of the huge things with this switcher, never done it before, this has internal storage in it. That is network-based storage. That means that as soon as I close off recordings, I can access that recording on the network. That is really cool for quick workflow, right? 2 terabytes internal storage is what this is shipping with at the minute. Now, when Grant released this, he did say in his release video there might be a time where we take that storage out, but currently I'm not aware of that happening anytime soon, and it is still shipping with 2 terabytes, and that's M.2 storage. Super, super fast network-based storage. There you can see on drive 1, I've got that internal storage selected. I'm going to jump into my file name, and I'm going to call it SA Event Day 2. I've got these little tick boxes down, display status like my streaming, recording all cameras is a really cool one, and ISO record all of those inputs. You will see, if you look next to drive 1 there, if I deselect that, I get 974 hours of recording of my program output. As soon as I ISO record, I'm down to 7 hours. The reason being, I'm in streaming low. So that is just going to record my program output at like 3 megaseconds. So that's why I've got all of that time. The ISO record, and the reason this is because if you're doing the ISO record, generally we think you're going into post-production. So what will you want in post? The highest quality file, right? So basically, you can see when I drop down this menu in quality, we've got Hyperdeck High, Medium and Low. Hyperdeck High, at the higher frame rates, will go all the way up to 70 megabits per second. That is always set on your ISO records, because we always think if you're going to jump into post, you're going to want to remaster at that higher quality. So all of those ISO inputs are being recorded at Hyperdeck High, the highest possible quality we can do in the unit. Now, worth stating, obviously, this is a HD switcher. We're working in 1920 1080 up to P60, and we're encoding at H.264. So again, great kind of codec for, you know, data rates, working with other systems, things like that. But again, you know, it might not be the highest quality when you think about working with 4K, ProRes, RAW files, things like that. How can we potentially get around that? Well, we've got this record in all cameras setting. So what I can actually do, and this only works with our camera systems, is I can trigger record our cameras at the same time I'm trigger recording the A10. So as I mentioned before, I've got a USB-C SSD attached on that camera. That is going to allow me to record Blackmagic RAW 12-bit up to 6K resolution at the same time I hit record on here. Let's put all that into practice. So I'm just going to fade to black, and I'm just going to do a quick recording. So I'm going to hit record, I'm going to fade up from black, and I'm just going to do some source selection. Probably the worst program you've ever seen in your life. Some of the worst cuts, things are out of focus. Again, you know, but it's all for the demo purpose, right? No one on my YouTube channel has seen any of this because I ain't got no followers. Right, fade down to black, and I'm just going to stop the record. Fade up from black, because obviously you really want to see what I'm doing. I'm now going to just get rid of these little bits, and I'm going to jump into that network storage. So on a Mac, I'm going to go, and I'm going to go connect to server. I'm just going to browse because I'm on the network, and it's going to give me whatever's on this network. There's my 8M Television Studio HD8 ISO. There's my internal storage. And there are those files instantly. And as soon as I've closed off that recording, they're accessible. Now think about, I'm on the ground floor in my studio. I've got editors up on the 5th floor. We're all tagged in on the same network. Close off that recording, they're in. They're in. They can start to work with all of this information. You can see here, we've got all of our audio source files recorded as separate 48 kilohertz WAV files. That means that I've got all of my MADI inputs coming in, I've got all of my embedded inputs coming in, I've got my RCAs, I've got my XLRs, I've got my video ISO files because I selected to record all of those isolated files. I've got my program output, again streaming low, H.264 MP4, but this is where it gets cool. I've got a DRP project, so this is a DaVinci Resolve project file that is embedded that live cut into a timeline. So I've live streamed, right? Now we're talking. So I've just live streamed this, and this has replicated that perfect live stream into a timeline for me. It's all built, my edit's done. I can start to now move around that edit. So the cut page was designed with the ISO workflow in mind. This is my expanded timeline, so this is the entirety of my production that I've just created. This is my zoomed in timeline, so I can start to navigate this really quickly. Now, if anyone has not worked with the speed editor, this thing is incredible when we start to work with the ISO workflow. It's fully wireless, so I can start to move around, and I've just got this little dial here to start to basically move around my edit. Now, think about the idea of all of those files being recorded in isolation. Resolve is really clever, it's referencing all this stuff. Smart indicators are telling me anything I want to do now is going to affect this edit point. I'm going to always hit video only because I don't really want to be affecting my audio at this point. I'm just affecting edit points because again, I've mastered my audio in the unit. I've set all that correctly. My master output is mixed. I just want to target my video. Because my smart indicator is set here, I can literally just hit roll on this and I can just start to roll that edit point. In the live production, actually I cut to that camera too late, too early. I can just jump in and just remaster that edit point because again, Resolve is referencing all of that isolated information. I can change duration of transitions. If I want to jump over an edit point like that, hit transition duration, I can just change how long that transition is set for. Maybe I didn't like the auto mix on that. Maybe I just wanted a cut. I can just change it to a cut, no problem. Now, this is where it gets really cool. This is where this shines. This can do something that none of our other panels can do. And if you were to do this with a mouse and keyboard, it takes a bit of time in Resolve. I hit sync bin. Anyone who's worked with a multicam edit before will realise what kind of this is. This is showing me all of my 8 inputs that were coming in, all in timecode sync, all with those playheads ganged. I see at this point, as an audience member, I probably bored them to death because I just stayed on that angle for far too long, and really there was loads of other amazing stuff going on, and maybe I should have just added some more cuts in there just to add a bit more interest into that edit. This has an amazing feature that I just, it absolutely blew me away when I started playing with this. We can, with the mouse and keyboard, look at which camera it was that I was going to start to work with, and then start to basically pull in some of that information and drop it on my timeline. But what I can do with this is hit source override and then hit one of my camera inputs, and at this point we're on camera 3 and maybe camera 2 is a better input. He says.
Live preview. Live preview.
Say word?
Live preview.
Oh, live override, that was the one, not source override. Sorry, there's a button above video only, live override. Have that engaged, and then I did think, well, I didn't know, like, come on. Have that engaged, and then what I'm going to do is just hit camera 2, and I'm essentially just going to paint that camera angle on. Everything is timecode synced, so that is just in sync, straight from the go. And if you think that's impressive, let's just hit one last little feature that, again, if you remember, I trigger recorded this camera. This camera recorded Blackmagic Raw in 12-bit. Think about this, this is a HD edit, H.264 in 8-bit, right? It's fine for live streaming, but maybe I want to actually just get higher resolution acquisition. Maybe I want to work in something a little bit of a better codec. Maybe I want to grade this. Maybe I want to take it into the colour page. I'm going to jump into my media pool, and already Resolve will auto add a Blackmagic Raw folder for me. I'm going to jump in there, and I'm just going to import media. That is my SSD that I've just attached into my Mac. Again, the camera has taken the name from the ATEM of the file, so again, Resolve will be able to reference this because it needs to look at file names for this. And in the metadata slab, all I needed to do was basically put the camera input number to reference the input it was correlating to the ATEM. I'm going to open that, and if I click that, that is my Blackmagic Raw file. So I can see that is this input, essentially, that I've just painted on here, I think. Imagine I'm doing a 4-cam setup, everyone has been record triggered, I've created my edit live, and again, 8-bit, H.264 in HD. I jump up to timeline up here, I click literally one button, and that has just swapped out any time that camera angle is live in my timeline to that Blackmagic original file. So that is my Blackmagic Raw now, and you can literally see in the viewer, anytime I switch back between that, switch to ISO recording, it's going back to my ISO H.264 recording, and my timeline, switch to camera originals, and it's just tagging it back to my B-raw. It's like a proxy edit. But think about that, right? I've just now switched my whole timeline to 6K resolution with 12-bit colour information, and I've created my edit live. Efficiency, right? The amount of productions I can now start to work on, and how quickly I can turn around things. And even just for archivability, maybe I want to come back to this later, and by that point, a year down the line, I'm working full 4K all the time. I've got this 6K footage that maybe I want to bring some of this content into another production. Archivability is amazing. 12-bit colour information, I can jump into that colour page, no problem, and start to grade that. And because there's all that colour information in the file, I can start to push and pull that, no problem whatsoever. Now, because I'm into that so much, I've obviously just overrun a little bit on probably the amount of time I should have done on that. Hopefully it's wowed you a little bit, because like I said, from my time in production, spending 12 hours shooting in a day, wrangling data at night, trying to create rough edits at night, then I'm back in production again the next day, absolutely nails you. So to be able to create edits live, I think like music videos, perfect example, right? It's all tempo based, I'm cutting on tempo. So to be able to do that physically on a unit, and then have the edit live, and then be able to reconnect to my camera originals, and again, it's our cameras that can do this, so we can only record trigger our cameras to do it, is hugely, hugely impressive. I hope you agree, because I think it is.
Yeah.
One thing that Michele mentioned earlier, I'm just going to do it really quickly, and again, if you want to know more about this, you can jump up at the end and we can talk about it. We can do direct connection over Ethernet from our studio cameras now. So the Studio Camera 4K Pro G2 and the 6K Pro, we can do direct connection over Ethernet. This is the idea of bringing in like remote sources. So maybe I've got someone again, ground floor studio, 5th floor boardroom, camera in the boardroom I want to bring down into my production. I can do that over the network now. So just do it all over Ethernet cabling. And essentially what we're doing is streaming from the camera to the switcher. The way in which we enable that on this switcher is we just go into our settings cog down here and ensure that this is selected, enable switches to be discovered on the network. I then hit done, and then, yeah, go on, we'll go for it, we'll give it a blast. So I'm just gonna, just realised that cable is definitely not going to be long enough to reach the switcher. So essentially, I'm just going to take that Ethernet connection, and all I've done is just taken it out of my studio camera converter there. Oh, I'm getting a bit of feedback. And I'm just going to go into my Ethernet port. So again, like I said, first thing you want to do is just make sure that's selected on there. And then I'm going to jump into the camera. And in the setup menu on the camera, yeah, I'm going to need power. Again, lovely short power lead. Really short power lead. So I'm just going to power up the camera. Again, obviously we're going over that Cat 6 with the studio converter, so that was sending the power. Thank you, Michele. And I'm just going to jump into the setup menu. You're not going to be able to see this, but again, I can show you this after the session if you want. Now within the setup menu, we have a dedicated menu page for streaming. So again, like I said, we are streaming from the camera. This is going to introduce a bit of latency because we're essentially sending the stream over the network. But I jump in there, and because I've selected that enable switches to be discovered on the network, this is now feeding on the network because it's set to DHCP, so it's instantly targeted that IP address. The platform just appears. So my ATEM is one of the platforms. Michele mentioned it earlier, we can stream to YouTube. All of the platforms we saw in there directly from the camera, but I can stream to my ATEM. So I'm just going to basically just reselect that. My streaming key just gets auto tagged on that, and I'm going to go into streaming. Streaming high will do for this, hopefully. And I'm just going to basically select that stream to be on. That is now live, and what I can do on my sources is you'll see here that we've got those 8 sources for the inputs, but what I can do, as soon as that is activated, that stream is being sent, these all become menus that I can start to affect. So on 2, I'm going to drop that down, and there is number 2 because it's been added into the project metadata slate on the camera. We can name that whatever we want. You know, if this is Dave operating the camera, I can just call the camera Dave, and I know instantly this is going to be Dave's camera coming in. Instantly tally lit up, so we've got that coming in. I'm going to go to my super source, and let's go to multi-view. So there you can see, that's that latency we're introducing. You can see there, I'm panning the camera, and then you're getting a little bit of latency coming through. But what an amazing feature to be able to add into a camera system for that live stream. And again, we can live stream to platform based on that as well. And now I'm just going to quickly just finish up on showing you a diagram. I know I've overrun a little bit, so maybe question time might be a little bit tight on this, but again, we can just start to ask any sort of questions out on the demo area, no problem. I'm just going to change my display settings very quickly. I'm just going to finish up just to give you an idea of the options that are available for this. So that's what we can do essentially. I've done that first one just in front of you there, direct Ethernet connection from camera to ATEM. Obviously there is a 4-port switch on the back there. Maybe I want to bring in more than 4 cameras. How do I do that? That's when we'd use a network switch. So we'd plumb all those cameras into a network switch, we'd take one feed from the network switch into one of those ports, and then we'd start to detail that down on the sources. This is where it gets even cooler. We can use mobile data or wired connections to stream over the internet into our ATEM. Michele mentioned it before, that ATEM streaming bridge, that's a product that decodes the stream back to SDI, HDMI. We've essentially got those built into this switcher. So we can basically use mobile data. So imagine, you're out in the field, you're doing a report and you want to bring it back to the studio. You plumb in your mobile phone, again, go to the place before, check you've got 4G data at a good connection. Plumb in your mobile phone via the USB-C connection on the camera, utilize the mobile data of the phone, stream over the internet and bring it into your ATEM as an input source. That used to be so expensive to do, right? What Blackmagic is great for is taking those complex, expensive workflows, simplifying it and making it accessible to the masses. And I just think that's incredible. Again, giving people the option to bring in remote sources is an amazing thing. I really hope you've enjoyed that session as much as I have. I think I've probably made more. Thanks so much. Has anyone got any questions? Like I said, we've probably got about 5 minutes. Any questions? I will be out there on the demo stations. Anyone's got any more questions that we can't fit in, please do just come and ask.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
My first question is, does this system, does it just work around like different aspect ratios depending on where you want to live stream to? Say you want to live stream to TikTok or Instagram, does it convert the footage
Can't do any sort of configuration on the output to change that.
Thank you.
Great feature request though.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to know, we just got the ATEM 4ME constellation recently.
Nice.
Does it support the ISO features that you have shown us here today?
It doesn't, no. So only the switches that have ISO in the name support that ISO workflow. Like the ATEM Mini Extreme, for example, we do a non-ISO and an ISO version. The non-ISO will be able to record program output, but it won't do any of that isolated work. Obviously what you can do, and it does add kit into your setup, but like with the 4K8, for example, that does not support the ISO workflow. We have auxiliary outs like you do on your Constellation. Those auxiliaries carry the time code from the ATEM. You would need like a stack of hyperdecks, and you basically auxiliary out all of those dedicated inputs. They'd all be time code synced, and then you build a multicam edit over time code in Resolve. The only thing you won't get there is that DRP project that embeds that live edit. We've only been able to make that in the HD within the ISO products that we can see here. But I'm hoping that that might be something we're looking at in terms of having hyperdecks stacked, and then maybe a piece of hardware or even software that can tag into that and take the EDL, so like the edit decision list from the ATEM, and build the DRP. It's something I'm crying out for with Australia, but we'll see where we go, right?
And then just in terms of the distribution, coming to South Africa, how long is the waiting period for that?
For this switcher,
yeah.
I think, have they got them in stock here? Yeah? Yeah, Jason's just put his thumb up, he's got them in stock, so maybe speak to Jason. And we've got a promo running at the moment.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Thank you very much for the session. I wanted to find out, in terms of the camera controls, is it only applicable to Blackmagic cameras? So
it is.
So if you have other cameras, it won't work at all?
It won't work at all, okay. No. There are some universal RCPs out there that can control multiple styles of cameras. Unfortunately, we are working at sensor level with that camera control, so we need access to other manufacturers' sensors. As I'm sure you can imagine, a lot of other manufacturers don't want to give you access to their sensor because that might be their proprietary technology. So at the moment, no, it's only Blackmagic cameras, and again, the record triggers and everything. We had some hands up down on the front here, yeah?
It was the same question I was going to ask, so there's no need asking that, because now if you use another camera, I was going to add to the question that, is there a way the color grading can be the same? Because sometimes you're streaming and you have different kinds of camera, but then the color, the gradings are not the same. You see, this one is this way.
Totally understand, yeah. And that's what's great with our cameras, because again, as an operator, I can see all those cameras coming in on my multi-view and shade them to obviously create seamless edits between those inputs. What I would recommend doing is, if you've got cameras that support LUTs, take some footage from the camera in the space that you're going to work in. Resolve can generate LUTs, so you can work on a grade in Resolve and export it out as a LUT, and then add that into the camera. So we can do that on our cameras. It depends what the camera systems you're using. If they support LUTs, jump into Resolve, create a LUT in Resolve that helps match those cameras, and then add them in. Generally, what you tend to do is find the kind of base level camera and then match everything down to that camera level. So I get loads of people working with GoPros. Unfortunately, the problem with the GoPro is the actual quality of what it's pumping out is not great, and they'll buy all these expensive camera systems and then match them all down to a GoPro. So you kind of find that base level setting, and again, GoPros don't support LUTs. So if your cameras support LUTs, our cameras support LUTs, just go to the venue, shoot some footage, get into Resolve, create some LUTs, and then use those for your live output. I think, did you have a question?
There's a gentleman here as well.
Yeah.
Alright, thank you. I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
So, I wanted to find out, so I have a ATEM Studio Pro 4K.
Yes.
So,
is that the old Television Studio Pro 4K? Yeah.
So, the software that records, is it only compatible with this one, or you can use the encoder on the PC to actually stream and do all that?
Only, like I said, any of the products that have the ISO in the name support that ISO workflow with the DaVinci Resolve project. The old Television Studio Pro 4K, there was no way to support that on that unit. You could take an output into a computer and record your program output in like QuickTime, or use a hyperdeck to record your program output.
Okay. And then the second question is, you see, you showed us the DaVinci workflow.
Yes.
Does it, during the live broadcast, So can you feedback back into the mixer, like if you want to do your highlights?
You only get access to that, and obviously the beauty of RAW, you've got the metadata, so if you want to change the colour balance and things like
So
that.
it's not just applying it to them as well?
No, it's just on output, yeah. Right guys, thank you so much for coming and being so attentive. We're going to go back over there. Any more questions, please pop through. That the only way to get that ISO standard board is to take your auxiliary out as soloed inputs and take it to a stack of HyperDecks.
Yeah, because when I'm just looking at like television program, like I would love it.
Oh, well, I'd love it.
Because when I'm looking at
it to the client.
Yeah, because for me it's just one of those things where, like the campus at really nice, really shows, but I'm looking at our outputs are going like this.
24 on the forum.
Oh, yes. No, I'm just talking about like...
destinations.
I work for Blackmagic, any sort of like product. I cover digital cinematography, live productions, or any sort of. So the focus of this session this time is going to be, first of all, we'll talk about filmmaking in general and how we see this camera being used in the market by you. I think the best things about this camera is that they keep growing based on your feedback, based on the ambassador feedbacks, people that use it all the time, DOPs, and we can really take that on board and keep evolving and evolving to produce this fantastic system. And then obviously we will have a look at the market where these cameras sort of like sit, because yes, we do need to answer some of your questions, but also we need to stay relevant to the market that we kind of like tackle with this system. Then we will move to the shared technologies, because you might have noticed while playing with the camera on a stage, that these cameras have a lot in the camera series. Like, what is this? And we came out with a cinema camera, 2.5K, and it was one of the few systems, probably the only one back then, which had a small form factor, super 35mm sensor with 14 stop of dynamic range, shooting RAW internally. Back then, all of us in sort of like documentary, filmography, or anything like, you know, of the liking of even like wedding or house of worship, we were using these Canon 5D cameras or DSLR cameras similar, because they were giving us this sort of response, the Super 35 depth of field, the separation with the background, so the lovely blur and the bokeh, because we were using this kind of system. But then this camera was disrupted because, unfortunately, those DSLR systems were only sort of giving us a bit of a hard time when working with the codecs, for example. They were only recording H.264, perhaps in 8-bit, so you were limiting the capability of the sensor of capturing Super 35 with a beautiful sharp lens, but then unfortunately it was falling short at the very, very end, where it's more important. So this camera, the cinema camera, was brilliant, and then after that, moving on, we released the Pocket Cinema Camera HD. That was a pocket-sized camera, beautiful little object. Again, RAW shooting capability on a Micro Four Thirds mount. It was brilliant, recording an SD card, RAW file. Moving on, then we announced the first Ursa broadcast camera, and then Ursa Mini, and then obviously we evolved and evolved and evolved, and then we kind of like fast forward to 2019, I believe, and we announced the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, which was great. Not so pocket anymore, but still very, very good. I think as a pocket, it refers to the combination when you work with it along with the system, which is a bit more like full-size camera system. So it's pocket in reference and respect to the 12K or the Ursa Mini Pro camera. But I think the ethos has always been the same throughout. We always wanted to sort of like giving you guys a Hollywood quality image or system that can produce this massive, beautiful picture at an affordable price. Okay? And also with the same sort of feature that you want from a professional system. Okay? So that's what certainly was our aim. It was inclusiveness. We didn't want you to compromise on anything. We wanted to give you the best possible image quality that could literally spring you up there in the market, okay, without any sort of compromise. So that's why we believe so much in your feedback. So certainly really mandate 4K sometime. And working 4K has twofold sort of benefit. First of all, when you work in 4K, you're oversampling the image, so you can definitely have a fantastic quality when you're shooting HD. So your lens, for example, they can resolve a lot of information. They can resolve more than your sensor can do in some aspects, okay? So for example, when you're resolving the information through a 4K glass and you're projecting into an HD, that means that you're using the best part, the best ability of your lens, okay? So that's an important thing. The other factor when you're talking 4K is the fact that you are always oversampling the information, and whatever goes down is basically the result of that sampling, okay? And then what else? Well, 4K becomes, again, a mandate for somebody, okay? Some of the biggest customers. Think about Netflix, Amazon Prime, you name it. They are all now asking for 4K delivery, okay? And 4K acquisition because of that. And they standardize that to the point that some camera system needs to be certified, okay? So you can't go there with anything, with your DSLR camera. You can't go with that, okay? You got brilliant mind, brilliant idea, simply the hardware becomes your limitation, okay? And then think about 4G and 5G. Every one of us here has got a smartphone here, and probably you spend the majority of the time looking at your YouTube video and everything in your spare time, and these are now pushing the boundaries because 4G and 5G allows us to actually push the information to 4K, okay, which is great, fantastic, but again, that becomes in acquisition a sort of limitation if you don't kind of marry with that kind of technology. So there are lots of benefit in shooting 4K and even higher. And when I say even higher, I'm referring to very, very specific workflows, okay? An example here could be CGI, working in visual effects department, okay? Where when you're shooting higher resolution, it's beneficial to your composite, okay? If you look at the picture, for example, here, this is a real scene shot at 8K, and the robot is actually just CGI composed on top of it, okay? Or maybe think about another aspect which is quite current now, which is called photogrammetry. The photogrammetry, in a nutshell, it boils down to LED volumes, okay? So when you work in this kind of environment where you got like massive green screen or perhaps LED volumes, which are projecting something, you are working with something which has a massive resolution, and you need to get closer to that, okay? And you need to compensate for any sort of aberration that can happen when you get closer with the camera system to this LED wall. Think about Moira effect, think about, you know, false color. These are all the problems that you get, so you need very, very high resolution to tackle that. And that's why a system like the 12K camera is brilliant, because again, it shoots natively in 12K, and it will be like, whoa, 12K, what do I do with a 12K? Nobody is projecting 12K. How big is going to be this 12K? Well, it's only sampling at 12K to then give you an 8K or a 4K output, okay? And when we see how it does it, you'll be quite impressed, because there is a massive development in the sensor technology that we put into this, okay? And that allows you few more extra workflow to run through this camera, okay? But let's see how these cameras are placed basically around the market and the needs that you have. So let's try to match the two things, where you are and where the market is, okay? So obviously, if you are in a specific market where perhaps you are producing something very, in terms of interest, very specialistic, think about educational sector, for example, when you want to do your web streaming, your vlogging, maybe you're just an individual that needs to do everything by himself, okay? Something maybe be more affordable as well, at your reach, using, I don't know, maybe micro four thirds lenses, not very expensive. Well, the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is a brilliant system for that, okay? But then obviously, again, answering some of the market needs, if you need to crank up the resolution, you need a little bit more, perhaps you are committed to commercial, that have some sort of requirements, you want to kind of like downscale or maybe re-rack some shot because you're doing documentary style, so you need to move fast, but the 6K is probably the camera that can do for you. But then there are, again, some sort of requirement from you from the aesthetic point of view. So think about the focus cinema camera 6K Pro, which offer ND filters or HDR capability in the monitor output, okay, or the LCD. This is something that when you're out there and you try to tackle exposure, for example, is really relevant. Again, like the example I did before with the rain in Manchester, we don't get that problem. But when you're shooting against the sun, when you're shooting in bright lighting condition, having the ability of this creative choice that you can use through the ND filter is really relevant. Okay, so that takes you there. And then obviously we mentioned those specialized type of job. You might be involved in production where you have to work within an environment which require high-res shooting or visual effects plates. Maybe you're just being asked to create just a bunch of plates, okay, at the highest possible quality, okay. And not everybody has the budget to go with the big boys out there and get an 8K camera, okay. Yes, you can rent it, but that rental price kind of has, you know, its limitation as well. So it's, I wish I could own that piece of hardware, okay? But again,
because the forest, we need to be prepared for any eventuality that comes our way.
Rangers are a very strong and critical force. They will do anything to protect wildlife. These are the voices. Somebody has to speak. Working together with the community, we are conserving for the future.
Together, we serve beyond ourselves for the benefit of the whole world.
okay. So, can you tell me which camera was used in this piece of work? Hint, it's not an array, it's not a red. Okay? Yeah, it's a Blackmagic camera, but which one?
6K Pro.
6K Pro, just guess.
I think it's the Ursa.
You think it's the Ursa?
Are they pocket one?
Well, thank you. Some of them guessed right, because you all guessed right, because actually it was both of them, right? You can't really tell which one is which, okay? Because we do have some shared technology there, behind that allows us to really work closely to the same technology and produce these images that are really, really close to each other. But I wanted to highlight three main things that really represent the core and the heart of Blackmagic technology in terms of cameras. The first one that I want to highlight is probably the operative system, okay? When you're picking up a camera, the first sort of feeling that you get is really, really important, is how fast you move through the menu, how quickly you can get from one thing to another in order to achieve your shot. Especially if you're working in a documentary, that is really, really important. You haven't got the luxury of time. As simple as that. You need something that is really, really quick, okay? So, and that is really consistent throughout the line of camera that we got. Even the broadcast camera, so the production camera, have got the same menu, same contextual menu. And when I say contextual, I mean a touch screen where when you press something, it only shows things that are relevant to that selection. You don't have to scavenge through the menu or go into the sub-menu to find something in a very confusing sort of sub-menu. So, in that respect, that is a massive bonus, okay? And the other thing is, obviously about the menus, that there is not lag, there is not waiting time. Sometimes I remember picking up, you know, some of the big boy cameras, these are red, and whenever I had to change, even the frame rate was going from 25 to 50, because I need to go a bit faster, or 60 because I want to do a little bit of slow-mo. Okay, select to 25, reboot time. No, I had to wait good 20 seconds for the camera to reboot. Right, my moment was gone. It was gone, okay? And that happens anytime I change something, you know, okay, my aspect ratio. Maybe I'm doing 2.4, maybe I'm doing 185. Maybe I have to shoot vertically because I'm doing a vlog, I'm doing something on TikTok, and I want to shoot vertically. So I'm quickly going to move the camera around. Right, okay, reboot time again. So, no, there is no lag, And again, no compromises, okay? So this is one, and it's really, really important, okay? The other one, and I think that is really important because it goes down into the DNA of the camera, is the color science, okay? Color science for us is absolutely pinnacle, is absolutely right there, is what we really, I think what we shine for, especially in the market when people think about Blackmagic and they think about how close this is in terms of color fidelity and reproduction to really big cameras, okay? And we are very jealous about this. And our knowledge and our understanding of color is really inherited from DaVinci Resolve, as simple as. Our camera understands color so well because we have the experience of DaVinci Resolve, years and years and years of experience of dealing with color. And we built the camera the other way around. We built the camera after DaVinci Resolve. We didn't build the camera to then work with DaVinci Resolve. Okay, it was the other way around. So we knew that we could potentially exploit the power of our color understanding and migrate it into a camera system. Okay, so we now have in every single camera the Generation 5. Okay, Generation 5 is an evolution of Generation 4, obviously. This means that this new curve that we propose in this system are a bit, I would say, flatter than the G4. So that means it returns an image which is flat, but at the same time it saves a lot of the roll-off and the highlights. At the same time, even if you're shooting Gen 5, that doesn't mean that in Resolve you can't go back to Gen 4. Gen 4 is a bit more like, almost like a C-Log 2, where you start with a bit more contrasty curve, so ready for action, okay? So it completely depends on you, but in acquisition, we give you the best possible color science there, okay? When we talk to the director of photography, the feedback from them was like, this camera's got very much like, well, the skin tones are very nuanced, they are very vibrant, okay? And that's what we want. Not only the skin tones, only the texture that we got through, light, material, any sort of, condition that could be tricky. Maybe think about, a twilight or maybe a sunset where you got this combination of lighting, artificial or natural. So you really need to understand these sort of like little differences in lighting conditions, okay? So I think the Gen 5 is really important. And why is it the core of our camera? Because for us, this is basically the same way in the old times we were developing films, okay? So if you had an analog film, you had to develop into a bath to produce a particular mood or particular color, that's what you do. And the color science does exactly the same, okay? It's the way the camera sees color naturally, and then the post-process, the chemical bath, is done in Resolve. So in that aspect, then you can change whatever you like, okay? So this is why it's so important. Natively, we need to be very, very high quality, okay? And they match. Change this little profile. I'm gonna now stick this amount of information that I got from the wide gamut shooting that my sensor can do into the color space of my choice. Today's Rexton 9, tomorrow's Rexton 220. So I'm ready to go from an SDR to an HDR workflow in a flick of a second, okay? So that is the benefit of Blackmagic Raw. It creates this kind of like seamlessly workflow from acquisition through a codec into a suite such as an editing or color grading and visual effects suite, which is DaVinci Resolve. I'm pretty sure there is no one out there that can actually sort of be so sure about the workflow, because we do have everything. We tick all the boxes. So if you choose a camera, you know that you are a general camera, which is not Blackmagic. Sometimes you're really buying into one aspect of it. Maybe that camera is very, very good because of the resolution, or that camera is very, very good because of, I don't know, the dynamic range, or that codec is very, very good because of that delivery, or that suite is very, very good because it's, I don't know, I'm used to Pro Tools, or I'm used to whatever Adobe suite. But they are very specific. They only sell into this specific market. We got them all. So we know everything from acquisition to richly encoding into the delivery format. It's probably the only company that can do that, okay? So let's dive into each individual camera very quickly, okay? Again, I only picked few of the main features that this camera have, because I think there are so many, I can only kind of like, in the time frame that I got, go through some of the very specific. First of all, as we said, 3 models. We got a Micro Four Thirds, we got a 6K, Super 35, we got the Pro with the ND filters. So they are all 13 stop of dynamic range. They all offer dual ISO. So let's have a look at actually how they work. Okay. So actually the structure of them first. We got the connectivity here. The connectivity, again, no compromise. No nasty small HDMIs or no nasty audio connectors there. We do use normal mini XLR here for balanced audio, for example, 48 kilohertz at 24-bit in acquisition. We even have, to stay relevant to, obviously, to businesses and to the market, we got a USB-C which allow us to eventually expand the recording capability. I haven't mentioned it earlier, but the camera, again, is very versatile and also close to you. We shoot into media which are CFast card or SD cards, and through a USB-C we can use an external disk. That means, again, not proprietary media. You can go to the computer shop close to your house and buy an SD card, okay, quite easily. Same way when I presented earlier with an Ethernet cable. It's nothing complicated. It's nothing, you know, that you have to spend a lot of money for, because again, there is budget for anybody in that sort of like area. Okay, but again, these are the main advantage of that in terms of connectivity. And that output, that HDMI output that you've seen before, is still a 42210B output, which is a broadcast quality output. It's not, again, a 420. It's not a compromise, even when you use the pocket cinema camera in a live production. Okay. And then you see here rolling the ND filters, electronic ND filters, okay? These are 2 glasses, 2, not plastic glasses, these are proper ND filters, okay? And when I say proper ND filters, I mean calibrated to the color science of the camera. If you buy an off-of-a-shelf ND filter and you put it in front of any lens or any glass, well, you need to guess what sort of image quality you're going to get out of it. I'm not saying that it's bad, but you need to compensate for that, because perhaps there is a drift in the colorimetry. Because again, the filter, the different filter, doesn't know what my Gen 5 is, doesn't know anything about my color science. I do. So we put filters that are calibrated into that, okay? And the same thing, these ND filters actually have an IR cut as well into it, so an infrared cut. Okay, and again, that means that it's not drifting anywhere. Your black stays black. It doesn't go to red because you're cranking up the ND filters. Okay, so this is mainly what's happening there. And even when you play a clear filter, that is still going to have the IR cut, because we know that if you start pushing that information in color grading, it has to stay consistent. I need to be able to go to my colors and say, 2 stops down, please. 3 stops down, please. And he doesn't have to scratch his head, all right, 2 stops down, plus red, plus green, plus blue, plus just because it doesn't match, right? So that has to be quick. So the dual ISO is probably one of the most important features in this camera. And I think it's worth to kind of like explore it a little bit more and understand how it works, okay? Very, very quickly, it's a very simple schematic. As I said earlier, it's like having 2 sensors in one single camera, okay? In the pocket, the first circuitry, less energy into that, has a base ISO 400, and then the second circuitry has a 3200 as a base ISO. How do you move from one circuitry to another? Well, in another system, again, switch off the camera, switch it on, change it, reboot time, and then you are in the second ISO circuitry. Here, you just slide your finger on your LCD touchscreen panel, and you just move from one to another, okay? And that means, obviously, that you need to understand how it works. The further you move away from the native ISO, probably the noisier the picture will get, okay? But what's the other effect? You actually, which is kind of a bit counterintuitive here, you actually preserving the highlight, because there is the dynamic range distribution that moves up. Okay, so you got more stops above mid-gray rather than below the mid-gray. Okay, it sounds like counterintuitive because you say, oh, if I want to have more light and have more sensibility, I just move up and I get all the highlight details and everything. It's like, no, it doesn't really work that way, okay? So you need to take that in consideration. We shift the dynamic range up or down, okay? When you actually move at a level of 1250, literally the sensor switch to the second circuitry, okay? So what happened at that point? At that point, because it resets, now you got a clean picture because it's using less energy, so there's less noise here, okay? But more sensibility. And again, the more you move away from the native ISO, the more you shift in the dynamic range, okay? So if you want to preserve the low light details, you actually have to lower your ISO, okay? If you want to save the highlights, although your eye says, oh, this picture might be burned, you don't know that. Your eyes don't see as much as your sensor can see. Well, they do, but not in the way they capture, okay? The false color can tell you that, and we do have the false coloring camera, obviously, here, where it can tell you, right, this is now peaking. There's no information about that. But then, if you go in post-production, you're able to use properly these ISO, you know that when you deal down into, with your color wheels, this information comes back. Those clouds are coming back. It's not a burnt sky, okay? This is why the dual ISO is so important. So, resolution, we said earlier, is nothing if you can't really tie it into the view. It's exactly the same. Even
it only records in Blackmagic Raw, right?
No, you can send it.
So it's from the...
Well, the 80 minute self content in Blackmagic is just programming.
Okay.
And then you can adjust the settings of it, so it basically matches your streaming settings. So if you set your streaming high, let's say for streaming high, you set your hyperdeck high, so all of that is programming.
So what we'll probably do is we'll record to a so we're in the process of kind of getting that whole set up.
Yeah.
One of the challenges are like the software and all of that. Because what we do now is plug. So we put everything into our screen. Alright, let's start.
Zeus, aren't you getting a photo of this?
Yeah, it took me a moment. You can take me another one.
It's a video, okay, right?
Yeah.
Sorry? Just a minute. Sorry.
Alright, so and actually I'm just checking out the equipment that they have. You saw me working with a control deck right there. So this is great. This is something that you can go for. And of course we are going for as a company. We are going to get equipment like this. Great work, great equipment.